Om Maha Ganapataye Namaha. In this video, I'm going to explain to you why you are a devotee, even if you don't realize it, and how this created your reality now. So the concept of devotion is not limited to religion. Religion simply uses, or spirituality, different paths, use devotion as a tool or a medium to facilitate a certain product. Now everybody is engaged in devotion, whether they realize it or not. And in this video, I'm going to share about what is going on. So here's what happened. I was out for a walk, and a guy was driving by. He had this big old truck, brand new, big shiny truck. He had his arm out the door. He had his sunglasses on, and he had his hat on, and he just looked real cool. And he waved. He drove by, and he gave me a wave. And I'm not judging him, but what it snapped a light into my head, and this is what this whole video came about. And what I'm seeing is, see, how we created ourselves, how you became the personality, and why you may be unhappy right now is because you ended up becoming something that somebody else wanted to be, or something that somebody else convinced you that was cool, or something that convinced you to aspire to. So I was talking in another video about how our society puts us through this systematic conditioning process, where a lot of it is based on our authority figures, which is the celebrities, the politicians, the people in power, the people who appear to have achieved the ultimate in the best you can achieve in this society of materialism, which is wealth. They have power, they have fame. So a lot of our subconscious conditioning, whether we realize it or not, by being bombarded with TVs, movies, music, and all these things, we start from a young age latching on to these different concepts which are personified as people of what we think we need to be, or what our parents wanted us to be, or what our friends convinced us to be. And so you may have a job right now that you're sitting there like, oh my God, how did I get this job? And maybe you were encouraged, or something happened where you thought this was a really good idea. And this is where the concept of devotion is. Now, the question you have to ask yourself is, who are you devoted to? Who are you idolizing? So in the religious and spiritual world, they're idolizing gods, angels, messiahs. So like Jesus Christ, people who are devoted to him. The whole concept of spirituality and being devoted, what is the product it's producing? It is a product of producing you become that person. And Carl Jung would call it as archetypes. So archetype is a technology. When you devote yourself, when you fall in love, it's sort of like it bridges, it creates some an adhesive where you start there. Okay, I'll give you an example. Okay, there's a gentleman in India. I forgot the woman's name. She's a saint, Maya Man, I believe. I'm not really sure. But this saint, this guy was a devotee to the saint. She's no longer here, but he has there's an ashram in India where there's pictures of this woman all over the place. And this guy has devoted his entire life to this woman while she was alive. And then now he lives at this place, and he's just taking care of the pictures and all the ashram and everything. What's incredible is if you look at this guy's pictures when he was younger, in his like 20s, 30s, to where he's at now, he's now, I would guess, maybe in his 50s, 60s, 70s. His face has turned, he was so devoted, so in love with this saint, that his physical features themselves have changed to look like this woman. You can see it in the pictures. If I can find it, I'll put a link in the description of this video. But it's incredible. His face literally morphed to be, so the concept of devotion, when you have some desire to be like these celebrities, or desire to be like anybody, whether it's your parents, it could be your parents, it could be a prominent male or a female figure that was in your life where you thought this person is your role model, any of your role models, you end up trying to become like them. A lot of the time it's our parents, and you notice when you get older, you may pick up on patterns where you start to sound like your parents, you start to talk like your parents, you start to think like your parents, or it doesn't have to be your parents, but just look at this, be observant, because being observant gives you clues as what's going on. So my suggestion to you, and the kind of the purpose of making this video, is to reorient yourself to using your devotion or using your focus in a more productive way to produce something that you want. So if you want to, let's just use the concept of money, because everybody wants money, and nothing is wrong with that. You deserve money. Everybody deserves money. Now, you can use a wealth archetype to pull yourself to, because what are archetypes after all? The angels and the gods and goddesses. They are personifications of principles of the mind or principles of consciousness. So you have these pantheons of different deities. Now, before we had this monotheistic approach, what we have in the other traditions, although Hinduism is actually monotheistic, where they believe in the Brahman, which is the single force, but that it's not limited to just one being. It manifests through everybody else, saying that everybody is a unique expression. Everybody has the potential to become a unique expression of God. Just like you can think of it, God has a garden, and he has, when those flowers bloom, these are when these enlightened beings are blooming. These are the flowers. And they're all different kinds of flowers, and they all are fragrant. They all smell beautiful. They all look beautiful. They're all extremely pleasing to the eyes. They're all aspects of God. This is the concept of these pantheons of angels, of enlightened beings. Whatever you're familiar with and relate to, it doesn't really matter. If you want to go to quantum physics, these are the beings who have been able to identify themselves with the quantum ground state. The quantum ground state, which is the God potential within everybody. So if you look at quantum physics, you have the quantum ground state, a state of silence, a state of omniscience and omnipotence. How is that possible? Well, what is happening after the ground state? What is reality? We have strings that come up. We're identified up here in the distortion or modification of the ground state. And what we're trying to do in yoga, and we're trying to do in spirituality, if you want to call it that, or we're trying to doing as being a empowered human being, we're trying to identify ourselves not with up here and down here, because this quantum ground state is the lap. It's the seat of everything else. And it's just like, okay, say you're inside of a cruise ship, you're inside of your room, and you can see the room, you can see the bed. But if you were to get in a helicopter, all of a sudden you're able to see the entire ship, the ocean, you're able to see all the land. What you're doing from this quantum ground state is you're changing your perspective, but it's so much more than that. You're also acquiring the power of the entire potentiality of reality. This is where omnipotence comes in. Omniscience is you're able to see from a different perspective of the entire reality at once, simultaneously, because you're identified with the lap or the seat. So what these archetypes represent they represent perfections of different aspects of God. So a wealth archetype, for example, is the personification of perfect wealth consciousness. So an archetype like Lakshmi, and this is why they're universal. They're not limited to any religion. So in Hinduism, they call her Lakshmi. They call her, I think, Aphrodite in the Greek tradition. In the Egyptians, I believe she's an Isis. She's familiar with Isis. In Babylonian, Sumeria, I believe they call her as Ishtar. So she takes these different forms. She's all over the world because it's not just limited. It's a seed. Shrim Brzi, for example, the sound Shrim Brzi. When you plant that seed into human consciousness, it manifests as a divine being. At the highest expression, you have a Lakshmi. And this is for man or women. A man also can embody this wealth consciousness. I won't get into the masculine and feminine, but know that every person, your unconscious, Dr. Ply, and I think also Carl Jung talks about this, your unconscious is the opposite of, so if I'm a man here, my unconscious is female. And females similarly have an unconscious male. So there's a yin and yang. There is no difference. So it's important to harmonize both of them. But what I'm trying to say to you, to bring this all back around, is focus on these archetypes. Use whatever it is. If you want to use Jesus, Buddha, any of the messiahs, Rama, Krishna, Lakshmi, Shiva, whoever it is, pick somebody that you relate to, somebody that you aspire to be, and focus on them rather than focusing on limited beings, celebrities and other things. They're fantastic, and it is a technology like Dr. Ply has recommended, focusing on like Bill Gates to get money real fast. But you can also focus on these beings who have a totally balanced, perfected consciousness. So experiment with it. Now, if you're looking for money or wealth in general, Shrim Brzi is a mantra or the sound, and the personification of that sound is the goddess of wealth, Lakshmi. Similarly, if you plant that sound, we talked about planting in human consciousness, and it becomes a divine being as Lakshmi, or an angel, or Vishnu, the masculine aspect, counterpart of Lakshmi. If you plant it in the plant kingdom, you get turmeric. Turmeric is a representative of Lakshmi. This is why cows are considered sacred, because if you plant Shrim Brzi or the Lakshmi principle into the animal kingdom, it's the cow. And this is why the Hindus we think it's crazy to worship a cow. No, they understand. Native Americans, they're also very heavy into animals, the wisdom of the owl, the wisdom of the bear, because Everything and there's no mistakes. God didn't create this world randomly and sporadically. Everything is a symbol. Every tree, every plant, every animal is representing a certain principle of creation. So focus on the aspects you want and be very careful. I will end the video because it's getting kind of long. With be very careful who you focus on. So Dr. Ply gave a warning once. Don't go to archetypes like the Buddha if you want to live a materially rich life. Archetypes like the Buddha, if you go to temples for the Buddha and worship the Buddha, what you're doing is you're worshiping a nothingness principle. Buddha wants nothing to do with matter at all. And if that's something you want to do, that's your choice, and you can do that. But know that if you're going to focus on something like that, that's what the archetype Buddha represents. Now, do you have to renounce yourself to become a God man? Absolutely not. Dr. Ply, the Siddha traditions, and before religion and all these things became sort of corrupted, where we dichotomize spirituality is on one side, materialism on the other side. The truth is, God isn't poor. This is the great teaching of Dr. Ply. God isn't poor. When God comes here, is he going to be a poor person? No. God has all the wealth in the world. The entire world belongs to God. And when you manifest wealth, you're manifesting God potentiality. So you have to understand that but the problem is if you become lost in materialism, if you're not tempering that with the wisdom and also a spiritual identity, you have to bring the two together. So there's an intelligence, a natural intelligence and wisdom, and also material. It's perfectly fine to have both. God is wealthy, both wealthy and materialism, which is the wealth of all the money and all these things. And then the inner wealth is the feelings of joy and bliss and happiness, compassion, all these things that end up manifesting as this fulfillment. When you're fulfilled on the inside, you manifest fulfillment on the outside. If you're joyous on the inside, you project that out and you bring joy into your life by aligning certain circumstances in your life, certain environments, certain people. You'll be moving to certain spaces and all these things. You'll start manifesting money. Money, after all, is a representation. It's a projection of your inner wealth. So it's very important. Wealth is a very, very important concept. So I'll end it here. Look at Shrimberzy. Go on YouTube and look for Dr. Ply's Shrimberzy videos. He gives a mantra for free in several different places in the Ply Center channel. If you have any questions or comments, I'd love to hear them. Please leave them in the comments below. And as always, if you'd like to be notified for future videos, please click the subscribe and the bell notification button. God bless.